But notice it's very hard to know what is good. And it's quite difficult, even more difficult, to know what is true. But it is intuitively understood what is beautiful. So beauty is the easy way in. Beauty leads to the good and the true. And we are on the brink, I think, of taking a stride toward beauty that is the greatest stride in that direction since the emergence of language in the human species. And the emergence of language in the human species was the first shoe dropping in this enterprise. And the building of virtual realities that can be shared and critiqued and understood is the dropping of the second shoe. A true civilization lives in its own imagination and lives through its imagination. And when this is an accessible possibility to most people, I think a great deal of our inhumanity will simply fall away from us, because it is not inherent. It is the product of misapprehension of each other's goals and intent and aesthetic. So I think that's about all I have to say about that tonight. I get spun into it and I can't stop. I don't know whether I'm talking to yourself or to you or to me, but this is some of what we'll talk about this weekend. This may be the longest single uninterrupted spiel you hear from me. As I said, these things are best driven when people inject their agenda into it. But these are the things I'm thinking about. History feels very risky to a lot of people. I think that it is risky, but it is because the stakes are so high. We really have an opportunity to transcend ourselves and to fulfill the human enterprise on this planet. And, I'm so aware of the limitations of the people of the past, their agonies, their concerns. I mean, how many children were born stillborn? How many women died in childbirth? 9 times in the last 5 million years, the glaciers have ground south from the poles, pushing everything in their path. Those people didn't drop the ball. The amount of human suffering and agony that has gone into carrying us to this moment of privilege and opportunity is incalculable and can only be redeemed if we bring this inherent human beauty into the world as spiritual food for ourselves and for the human community. Well, it's very interesting. I'm working on a book now. A lot of it is about the subject of language. It's a little hard to talk about it in English, because in English the word language both means the general linguistic facility, and it also is heard as meaning speech. And as I looked into language and studied it, and studied what other people had said about it, there were some surprises. The first surprise is that the straight people in the field, what is taught in the academy, is that language is no more than 35,000 years old. This was astonishing to me. I just, for some reason, my own intellectual biases, assumed that the conservative academic position would be that spoken language is old, because it seems so basically a part of us. How can it have arrived 35,000 years ago? That makes it something as artificial as a bicycle pump or a transistor radio. Well, the problem here is that this word language is misheard in English. So in writing this new book, I had to make a very clear distinction. Language is old. Honeybees do it, dolphins do it. It's even possible when you think of chemical communication that flowers and ants do it. Nature is knit together by communication, which has rules, has syntax, and so is language. If you've ever stood in a rainforest or any species-dense environment, it's alive with signals, with sounds, with odors that are carrying messages. These things are not just produced for aesthetic effect. They have intended hearers and so forth and so on. And language in human beings is old because we know that we evolved from pack-hunting primates, socialized primates, that had, as we observe the behavior of primates alive in the world today, very complex repertoires of signals. Signals which mean dive for cover, an eagle is cruising the area, or here is food, enough for a dozen of us, and so forth. Complex pack signaling. What happened, it was the greatest technological leap we've ever made, and in some ways the cleanest and the most astonishing. It's almost like a resonance. Remember last night I mentioned how strange it was that the largest buildings people ever built were the first buildings they ever built. Well, the greatest technological revolution so far ever launched by human beings was, in a sense, this early one. I won't call it the first, because there was tool making before that, there was fire before that. But somewhere in Africa, no less than 40,000 years ago, and this means a time when human beings who look like you and I, maybe a little pigmentation differential, but basically people exactly like you and I, had already radiated all over the planet. I mean, by 40,000 years ago, nobody argues that people weren't everywhere. Recent finds in Australia have pushed back the date of Aboriginal penetration into Australia to 120,000 years. And that's not woo-woo. That's Wollongong University Department of Archaeology stuff. 120,000 years. So people were all over the world. Well, did they communicate? They certainly did communicate. They communicated with dance, with gesture, and, leading back to your question, with music. They communicated in all kinds of ways. But we now know from the study of the introduction of media that if a medium of sufficient power and bandwidth is introduced into a population, it will abandon all previous forms of media in favor of this. We saw this in America after World War II, when a print literate society within a decade became a television society. We are seeing it now where in the space of 5 years the internet goes from being say what to indispensable for huge numbers of people, and that's in the space of 5 years.